Once this nematode gets into the root, it can never move again, and so the nematode is going to direct the plant to take matter and energy for the nematode reproduction instead of going into your pods and into your beans. And with the resistant variety, the plant responds, no way. Okay? And so the female cannot reproduce, and that matter and energy then goes into your pods and into your beans. So that's one mechanism of resistance that's granted by varieties developed from PI 548402.
Does the female then die?
The female may die or she may not, but she definitely won't produce any offspring.
This year. So then
The female will only live for 1 year or a part of 1 year. Okay, so but there could be a residual population in the soil. Okay? So remember, I said they can survive for a long period of time. It's easier to prevent it than to get rid of it completely once you've got the problem. The second source of resistance is the most common one that has been used. That's PI 88788. Away from that. And this has been used widely in Michigan for the past 10 years. I think we're overusing it. We've got real good high yields with this. The mechanism of resistance is a little different. It's horizontal resistance, not vertical. What happens here is when the nematode feeds on the plant doesn't give it very good nutrition. And so the female is small, and she does not produce very many offspring. So your yields will be increased, and the residual nematode that goes into the soil won't be as great. So that's somewhat aligned with the question that you asked, okay, about the females. This one will survive, but it'll be much smaller. Widely planted. But before I'm done today, I want to encourage you not to overuse it. I have one farm that I've worked with for 12 years. We did a 12-year experiment, believe it or not, with a grower cooperator. Last year was the last year, 12th year. And it's a 2-year rotation with corn and wheat. And we've had a resistant variety of this source of resistance in for 6 times over the 12 years. And you know how Mother Nature can sometimes beat you. And now we have some populations in that field that can feed on this source of resistance. So that's what I'm talking about, resistance management. You don't want to overdo it. Here's our third source of resistance. In reality, the United States Department of Agriculture has identified 109 sources of resistance, and the seed companies have commercialized 7, but only 3 are available in seeds in Michigan. This third one is PI 437654. But at the moment, we don't have very high yielding varieties. As a matter of fact, I had trouble getting seed of this last year. You may have heard of it in the past as something called Hartwig, or remember 2-3 years ago people were talking to you about a new technology called Cystex. That might have set us back a year or two, but we're going to have good varieties in this in the not too distant future. So I encourage you to ask your seed companies for high yielding varieties in the future of this. And the reason is that it has both sources of resistance. It has the vertical, no nurse cells, and the horizontal, anything that escapes, very, very poor nutrition. Now, if you turn in this bulletin here to page 20, I believe you'll find a chart in page 20. And as I go on, I want you to kind of follow that. Is that the one that I'm looking at? I could have got okay on that. And now, across, coming down the columns, you'll find these sources of resistance plus a susceptible. Across the top are different SCN types. You know, grandma's 80 may have a different type than the back 40. With me? A little different type of population. So what do I mean by that? If you have a type 0, well, you never want anybody to call you a 0, do you? Okay? It's a wimpy population. And it can be managed by any source of resistance. Okay? So anything can be matched with it. It's not very aggressive, that particular, but it will reduce yields if you use a susceptible. It will reduce yields greatly if you use a susceptible. The farm that I told you that I'd worked on for 12 years, honest to God, true story. When I started working there the year before, almost every field had averaged less than 10 bushel. And the bank wasn't particularly impressed, okay, with that. Last fall, we probably averaged 40, maybe a little bit above. So we've made a lot of progress on that farm over that 12-year period. The second type is what we call type 1. And type 1 will feed on varieties from Peking, 548402. It's a very aggressive type. Now, you know, through your checkoff dollars, you can have a field assayed for nematodes. I'm not going to say free of charge because you're paying for it, but you won't get a bill, basically, for that. But what you're told is whether or not you have the nematode or not. If you have the nematode, whether it's a high, medium, or low population, if it's a low population, it's sort of your call. If it's a medium population, definitely plant a resistant variety. If it's a high population, I say you need to invite me to the coffee shop and we'll sit down and see how we can bring back that field over a period of a few years. So, PI 548402, do not plant, or a type 1, oh, they need to go on. To get the population in a field typed, MSU Diagnostic Services provides that service, but it's a $50 fee. And I get very mixed reactions from growers on that. $50 is a lot of money. George, that's very inexpensive for the benefits that I get from it. So I get the entire range from that. That does take 6 to 8 weeks because it's a biological assay that has to be done in growth chambers. So there's type 1 and type 2, and I forgot to take that slide out. And I do know how to count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But from a type standpoint, we are interested in 0, 1, 2, and 4. Because the type that could be solved by a type 3 resistant variety, you don't have those in Michigan. So we only have to worry about these type 4 types. So type 1 damages 548402. Type 2 will damage 88788. And type 3 will damage 437654. So, yes, sir.
Can you have all those types in one field?
Can you have all of those types in one field? Yes, and I know of about 2 fields in Michigan where I have seen that. Okay. That then becomes a real problem. Okay. What do you plant then? If you have all, I wish I hadn't asked that question, but it is described in here. Maybe you got it out of here. Okay. If you have that type, the one that we don't want, okay, that we don't have any resistance for, it would be a type 1.2.4. Not just 0, 1, 2, or 4, but we had the points on in relation to that. Sometimes on your seed catalogs and on your bags today, you'll find the term race. And race is an old system. It's explained in here. We haven't got all the seed companies off of that. It's still going to be a while. But the conversion from race to type is in here. But there are some types that there aren't race designations for. So if I had type 1, we could plant a variety from 88788 or 437654. No problem. If we have type 2, you would either use 548402 or 437654. If you use type 4, you use one of the other 2. So what I'm showing you here is sort of how one matches the type in a field with the best selection of a resistant variety for that particular field. That's complex, but we're going to get that way. We're going to get there down the road. Did I answer that question reasonably? Understandable? Yes, sir.
Will your types change from in the same field?
Will types change in the same field? Yes, over a period of time, types will change in the same field, depending upon what pressure you put with them, with the plant genetics. But I would say you're talking about a 5-year period, something like that. At least 3 plantings of beans to have a noticeable change. Yes, sir, in the back of the room.
What if you plow a 5-year-old hay field, put 2 years of corn in? Is that gonna change the types and?
A 5-year-old hayfield, that has soybean cyst nematode in, plowed up, and 2 years of corn, your type is not going to change. Your population is going to go down a little bit, but I would strongly recommend, if you knew that was a previous nematode problem site, to send in a sample. But the type's not going to change. Another question I never had before. Okay? By the end of the winter, I'll have quite a list.
Cold weather affect them?
Cold weather affect them. Yes, it very definitely affects them. When it starts to get cool in the fall, instead of producing water for their cytoplasm in their cells, they produce antifreeze. And so they are well adapted, sir, to cold weather. On top of that, okay, just before the female dies and becomes that protective cyst, without going to Monsanto, Bayer, or Syngenta, the female produces both fungicides and bactericides to protect her eggs for the next decade. How's that for Mother Nature's intelligence? Yes, sir.
Native or invasive species?
Native or invasive? The general consensus among scientists is invasive. There is another smaller school of thought in relation to that. Okay? It was first found in North Carolina in 1954 in the United States. We believe it's indigenous to China. We think North Carolina originally got it from Japan, but it spread up the Mississippi real fast. Okay, let's see where we go from here. Okay, a yield trial. I planted a susceptible down Mount Com County. It wasn't a particularly aggressive nematode population. I've worked on that farm maybe 6-7 years. And with the susceptible, I got 40.5 bushels per acre. Not going to brag about that at the coffee shop, but okay. And per handful of soil, at the end of the year, 6,000 nematodes. With me? 2 measurements. Then I planted the 88788. And you can see I got a 9 bushel boost. That's pretty good, 20%. And you can see the 88788 brought down the nematode population from 6,000 to 1,000 per handful of soil. We then in that field planted a Pioneer 92 M75, BI 548402 by 88788. The breeders are combining these things to get the best agronomic properties in there. And you can see we got 47.8 bushel. However, the SCN population was reduced 100-fold, down to 60. So you're not going to have very many remaining, okay, there in that field. We took another Pioneer species.